Hello, for this week for assignment, media representations of drug and alcohol use. I did mine on vaping, so I do not have cable. I just watch Netflix, Hulu, Paramount Plus. So on Paramount Plus is what has commercials for me. So I talked about the vaping commercials. It's just as addictive as a drug. It's nicotine, so I thought it'd be good to talk about this during our assignment. So for how it's presented to viewers, it is presented by using teenagers. So in all the commercials that I have seen, it uses teenagers as an example. And it explains how, for example, one of these girls in the video, she's a teenager. She explains that she got addicted to nicotine vaping and she was never an anxious person. She became an anxious person. Whenever she wasn't using it, she was so anxious. She needed to use it, anxious, addicted. And she was having trouble breathing. And just the addictiveness that came with it and all these symptoms that started happening after she started using it. She was never an addictive person with nicotine before this, and she was never anxious before this. And in the other video, it explains a girl that is in softball game and she is in the locker room, can't find her vape, and she's just freaking out and can't pertain to anything else is happening in the world. So one of her teammates comes in and is like, all right, we gotta go. And she just doesn't hear anything. She can't focus until she finds what she needs, which is her vape. And then after she finds it, she calms down and is very collective. But it's the addictiveness that she needed to be able to be coherent to anything else around her. And just making sure I have the video. And so it just shows that nicotine is just as addictive as drugs and alcohol. So even though I have not seen many commercials on Paramount Plus that shows alcohol or drugs, nicotine is just another type of drug in my opinion. I do not see a difference between like males or females. It kind of just is focused on teenagers because that's the audience that they're trying to focus on. And they're just trying to pinpoint the best audience. So before they used to do nicotine commercials with smoking cigarettes with older adults to pinpoint them to stop now. But now they are focusing on teenagers who are starting to vape. So talking about what we talked about in chapter 4 this week, or I'm sorry, chapter 7 this week, alcohol and other drugs. It talks about how it becomes a physiological and psychological factor. It's also a social factor. So for a lot of people, it starts off as a social thing. They go to parties as teenagers. They start smoking, vaping, and then it becomes, just here and there after social. And then it becomes an everyday thing. And then it becomes you're reliant on it. And it really becomes an addiction. And that's what happens a lot with drugs and alcohol. It becomes a social factor, and then it then becomes every other day, every day, and then becomes very addictive. And it is a disease. So a lot of people like to argue that. And once you get addicted, it does become a disease, and it's very, very hard to stop that. That's why they have rehabs for people who are on alcohol and drugs. So it becomes a brain disease, and you need the medical treatment to be able to come down from that. So if you just try to cold turkey quit, then you get withdrawals, and it is not very pleasant to deal with. And that's because of the withdrawals. Then people stop quitting because doing whatever you're doing, such as alcohol and drugs, then becomes easier than coming off of it. So just like nicotine, they have nicotine patches and all that. And then drugs and alcohol, they have rehabs to be able to help you go through the withdrawal stage and not go back onto the drugs after you withdrawed. So we talk about how the drugs make us feel good, so that's why people want to use them, and it becomes a normal part of their daily routine. So just like taking non-prescription drugs every day as their normal routine, or prescription drugs, we then start vaping, smoking every day, drinking alcohol, taking drugs because that's what makes us feel good. You get a high from drugs, smoking, and you get that happy feeling and everything's mellow, and you kind of start to get just, you're not with it, so you're happy. You don't have to, you know, all your senses are happy. So we basically just talk about how it becomes a social issue and then becomes more than a social issue. And just making sure I hit all the points for our assignment. They did not use any athletic figures or stars for the commercial, but they did use teens, as I mentioned earlier, as their audience. They usually will use like famous people for like drinking commercials and stuff like that, so they can get more of an audience. But with this, they're trying to really pinpoint a direct audience as teenagers. And I think that is it. All right, thank you so much.